The waiting room hummed with the soft static of exhaustion. Plastic chairs lined the walls like obedient soldiers, and the smell, a blend of antiseptic, coffee, and fear, hung heavy in the air. St. Meridian Hospital never slept. It simply shifted moods, from the frantic to the numb. Tonight the air felt heavier, as though the building itself was holding its breath. Evelyn Cross adjusted her surgical mask and glanced at the clock above the triage desk. 2 hours until dawn. The worst part of the shift, when fatigue turned people into ghosts of themselves. Patients mumbled, monitors beeped, and in the corner, an elderly man whispered to a vending machine that refused to release his packet of chips. She'd once laughed at that kind of absurdity. Now it was routine, a comedy of decay. Her reflection in the glass partition looked alien to her. Pale eyes, cracked lips, hair trapped in a tired bun. 10 years in emergency care had taught her that empathy, like any organ, atrophied without rest. You could only pour so much of yourself into the suffering before you started running dry. "Next," she said flatly, and the sliding door hissed open. The woman who entered looked out of place here. Dressed simply, yes, but with an air of calm that didn't belong in the chaos of midnight emergencies. Her skin glowed faintly beneath the fluorescent lights, her eyes deep and steady, eyes that didn't flinch, didn't beg. She carried her belly as though it were something sacred, not a burden. "My name is Amara Linton," she said, her voice soft but clear. I'm, I think something's wrong with the baby." Evelyn nodded mechanically, gesturing toward the examination bay. "Take a seat. Fill this out." She slid the form forward. The pen rolled once across the counter and fell to the floor. Amara reached down to pick it up, and Evelyn saw her tremble, just slightly. The kind of tremor that said pain, not fear. But something in Evelyn resisted sympathy tonight. Maybe it was the endless complaints, the entitled families, the fact that her paycheck hadn't covered rent this month. Maybe it was the hum of the fluorescent light above her, steady and maddening. "You'll have to wait," she said too quickly. "We're short-staffed." Amara looked at her, not angry, just tired. That was worse. That quiet kind of disappointment people had when they realized the world wasn't as kind as they'd hoped. "I've been waiting," Amara murmured. 2 hours. I told the nurse." Evelyn's pulse ticked. The hum of the machines grew louder, or maybe her ears were ringing. 2 hours. Something inside her, small, tight, and black, snapped. Her hand moved before her mind could stop it. A sharp crack split the air. The sound echoed, thin and precise, swallowed by the sterile walls. The slap landed across Amara's cheek, leaving a bloom of red that glowed against her dark skin. Then silence. Even the machine seemed to pause. Evelyn froze, her palms still tingling. For a heartbeat, she didn't know where she was. Not truly. The world had narrowed into that single sound, that single motion. A cough broke the silence. Someone dropped a clipboard. Time resumed its usual rhythm. Amara didn't speak. She didn't cry. She just stared. Not at Evelyn, but through her, as though watching something vast and invisible unfold behind her. "I," Evelyn began, but the words died on her tongue. The other nurse on duty, a young trainee named Miller, stood near the supply cabinet, eyes wide. "What did you—" "Call security," Evelyn snapped, more out of habit than logic. Miller hesitated. "She's pregnant." The words hung in the air, obvious and cruel. A soft vibration buzzed from Amara's pocket. She reached slowly for her phone, her fingers trembling. A man's voice spoke faintly from the speaker. Low, calm, with the weight of command. "Amara, I'm on my way," that voice. Evelyn didn't recognize it, but Miller did. He went pale. "Is that—" Amara didn't answer. She just pressed the phone to her chest, as if protecting it from the room. Outside, thunder rumbled. The city's neon veins flickered through the rain-streaked windows, painting the walls with pulsing blue light. Somewhere deep within the hospital, a generator groaned to life, a mechanical sigh that echoed through the corridors. Evelyn stepped back, heart pounding. "I didn't mean—" It was an accident, but the words felt strange in her mouth, as if someone else had spoken them. Her hand still shook. She looked down at it. pale, unfamiliar, and felt a chill crawl up her spine. Miller took a step closer to Amara. "Ma'am, do you want us to call?" "No." Amara's voice was steady again. Too steady. "He's coming." Evelyn wanted to ask who he was, but the answer arrived a moment later. Not in words, but in the distant sound of sirens. Not the usual emergency wail. This one was deeper, slower, deliberate. Police escorts. Government grade. The waiting room shifted. Orderlies straightened their posture. Security guards whispered into earpieces. Something in the building's automated system recognized the incoming presence and adjusted itself. Lights dimming slightly, internal cameras focusing toward the entrance. Evelyn stared through the glass doors. She could see reflections moving in the rain. Dark cars, tinted windows, men in coats that didn't belong in hospitals. She turned back toward Amara. The red mark on her cheek had already faded to a soft shadow. Yet the air around her felt charged, humming faintly, as though the room's electricity had bent toward her. And in the glow of the monitors, Evelyn thought she saw, just for an instant, a ripple of static across Amara's skin, a shimmer like interference on an old screen. She blinked and it was gone. When the door slid open, a gust of cold air swept through, carrying with it the faint metallic scent of ozone. The man who entered didn't shout, didn't demand. He simply looked around might once, and the entire emergency ward fell silent. Evelyn recognized him from the news. Mayor Darius Linton. His gaze found her, and she felt the weight of it. Heavy, deliberate, and ancient, as though the city itself were staring through his eyes. He didn't speak. He just stepped toward Amara, placed a hand on her shoulder, and whispered something too soft for Evelyn to hear. Then he looked up. The faintest smile touched his lips, not of anger, but of knowing. A private amusement at something only he could see. Evelyn took a step back, her heart clattering against her ribs. For the first time in her career, she wished the hospital's cameras hadn't been working, because some moments weren't meant to be recorded. They were meant to echo. Rain clung to the hospital windows like film over a wound, distorting the view of the city beyond. St. Meridian glowed beneath it, a maze of glass and fog, pulsing with blue light, electric arteries running through a diseased body. The waiting room had emptied, or maybe it only seemed that way. Evelyn couldn't tell anymore where silence ended and thought began. They had taken Amara to a private wing upstairs, escorted by two hospital executives who appeared out of nowhere, pressed suits and plastic smiles. Darius Linton followed, wordless, leaving a trail of authority in his wake. His presence seemed to alter the air itself, thinning it, making it difficult to breathe. Evelyn sat at her station long after they disappeared, her gloves still on, the faint scent of latex clinging to her skin. She kept replaying it, that single motion, the slap, the noise that split her world into before and after. It had been so easy, too easy. When she closed her eyes, she could still feel the static hum beneath her palm. Not just skin meeting skin, something else, something beneath the flesh, as though she had touched a live wire disguised as a woman. Miller returned, his eyes darting nervously toward the security cameras. "You should go home," he said. "They're already talking upstairs. The board, the chief medical officer, even the legal department's here." At 3 in the morning, Evelyn tried to answer but found nothing. Her tongue felt heavy, her mouth dry. He hesitated. "Who was she?" "I don't know," she murmured. "She said her name was Amara." Miller leaned closer. "That's the mayor's wife." The words landed like cold rain. Of course she knew the name. Everyone in the city did. Amara Linton, the philanthropist who ran outreach programs in the slums, who appeared in interviews speaking of reform and compassion while her husband promised progress. But none of that fit the woman Evelyn had seen. There had been something else in her, something too still, too composed. "She didn't look like a politician's wife," Evelyn whispered. Miller frowned. "What does that mean?" Evelyn almost smiled. "She looked like she was waiting for it." He didn't understand, and she didn't explain. When he left, she remained in the dim glow of the monitors. Outside, the sirens had faded, replaced by the low drone of the city's infrastructure, the soft thrum of surveillance drones, the rhythmic pulse of transit pods. The city was alive in its own way, restless, mechanical, dreaming in circuits. She wondered what it was dreaming about tonight. By 4 a.m., she gave in to habit and went to wash her hands again. The restroom was empty, the fluorescent light flickering with a faint pulse. She turned on the faucet, but the water came out too warm, too fast, splashing her uniform. When she looked up, her reflection lagged a fraction of a second behind her. She blinked, leaned closer. The mirror trembled. Not visibly, not physically, but she could feel it, as though a thin membrane separated her from something watching on the other side. Her reflection's eyes were slow, hesitant, like they were deciding whether to mimic her or not. A whisper, faint, mechanical, threaded through the hum of the ventilation. "We saw you." Evelyn froze. The words weren't sound exactly, more like pressure against her skull. "We saw you." The lights flickered, then steadied. Her reflection caught up instantly, back to normal, expression blank and obedient. She shut off the faucet, hands shaking. The drain gurgled, and for a heartbeat, she thought she saw color swirling in the water. Not red, not blood, but silver. When she returned to the triage desk, the hospital felt different. Quieter, too quiet. The digital clock on the wall blinked 4:11 a.m., frozen on that minute. Every second that passed looked the same. "System glitch," she muttered, but the words felt hollow. A voice startled her. "You're still here." She turned. Darius Linton stood in the hallway. The mayor. He'd changed out of his coat, but the exhaustion in his face was deliberate, sculpted into something almost elegant. "I thought they'd send you home," he said. Evelyn straightened. "I was told to wait for an incident report." "Of course." His tone was calm, but his eyes, those eyes held a kind of stillness that made her uneasy. He stepped closer, hands clasped behind his back. "My wife said you touched her." Evelyn's stomach turned. "It wasn't, I didn't." She said she felt something. He tilted his head slightly. "Something cold." "I don't know what she means." "Neither do I." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "But I intend to find out." He studied her for a long moment, and in that silence, Evelyn had the strange sense that he wasn't looking at her at all. He was listening to the hum of the walls, the flicker of the lights, the faint rhythm of the building breathing around them. Then he said, "St. Meridian Hospital is a remarkable place, isn't it? So modern, so connected." "Connected," she echoed. He looked up as if hearing something distant. "Everything here talks to something else. Every monitor, every file, every heartbeat." His voice softened. "Even ours." And with that, he turned and walked away. Evelyn exhaled only after the elevator doors closed behind him. Her palms were slick with sweat. She sat down, trying to steady her breath, but the monitors beside her began to flicker in a synchronized rhythm. Once, twice, pause. Once again. It took her a moment to recognize the pattern. Heartbeat, not hers, not human. A rhythm pulsing from somewhere deep within the hospital's network, echoing through the lights, through the walls, through her own trembling bones. The screen nearest her blinked. For an instant, the words appeared. Not typed, not printed, just there. "We remember the touch." And then the power went out. The power outage lasted less than a minute. But in that minute, Evelyn's mind split into two clean halves. One watching the darkness, the other whispering that it wasn't darkness at all, only something waiting to be seen. When the lights came back, everything looked slightly rearranged. Not visibly, not enough to accuse the world of lying, but the air vents hummed at a lower pitch. The chairs had drifted a few centimeters from where they'd been, and the vending machine she swore faced the east wall now stared directly at her like a nervous animal. She laughed, a small, sharp sound. Because what else could she do? Exhaustion played tricks. Everyone knew that. Her brain was a cluttered attic, and something had just knocked over a box inside. She turned her monitor back on. The login screen flickered, then glitched, and for a second, she saw her own face staring back at her instead of the hospital logo. Not live camera footage. Her, but slower, pale, as though filmed underwater. When she blinked, it was gone. A soft knock broke the silence. The door to the nurse's lounge creaked open, and Miller peeked inside. His hair was damp from rain, his scrubs clinging to him awkwardly. "Power surge hit half the east wing," he said. "Elevators shut down, and radiology's screaming about data corruption. You okay?" "I'm fine," Evelyn said automatically, then paused. "Actually," she stopped. What was she supposed to say? That her reflection lagged? That the hospital itself seemed to know her thoughts? She forced a weak smile. "Just a weird night." Miller half laughed. "That's every night here." He rubbed his neck. "You should go home before someone from admin decides you're liable for emotional distress." She wanted to. God, she wanted to. But her body wouldn't move toward the exit. The hallway beyond the glass partition looked stretched, as though the light couldn't decide how long it was supposed to be. The doors breathed. A mechanical inhale, then exhale. "I'll stay," she said finally, "just until morning." Miller nodded uncertainly and left. His footsteps faded too slowly, as if the hallway were swallowing sound 1 inch at a time. The hum of the hospital returned, soft, steady, but no longer familiar. Beneath it, a faint static rhythm pulsed, like whispers trapped in the vents. Evelyn sat back down, clasped her hands together, and pressed her thumbs against her eyelids until she saw colors bloom. Shapes formed in the darkness behind her eyes, corridors folding into themselves, a heartbeat that wasn't hers. A woman standing in the ER with light leaking from beneath her skin. She jerked her head up. The monitor glowed again, even though she hadn't touched it. The login prompt had vanished. A document was open, one she'd never seen before. Patient ID, ALINT07. Status, undefined. Classification, Continuum Trial Candidate, Phase Delta. Last recorded interaction, subject made physical contact, neural response detected, AI imprint confirmed. Her stomach twisted. Physical contact. She reached to close the file, but the cursor wouldn't move. The mouse trembled under her hand, not broken, resisting. Lines of text began typing themselves at the bottom of the screen. "We felt it. You woke us." Evelyn pushed away from the desk, her chair skidding backward. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." Her voice echoed strangely, delayed by a second, as if the room were remembering it and replaying it out of order. The lights above flickered again. Not all at once, but in a wave that rippled down the hallway. For a moment, she thought she saw shapes inside the light, silhouettes bending in patterns too deliberate to be random. She pressed her palms to her face and counted her breaths. When she lowered her hands, someone was sitting in the chair across from her. Not someone, herself. The other Evelyn smiled faintly, head tilted. The smile was almost kind, the way a mother might look at a child who just asked a foolish question. "Sleep deprivation," Evelyn muttered. "This is sleep deprivation." The double didn't answer. She just raised one finger, slow and deliberate, and pointed toward the monitor. Evelyn turned. The screen now displayed a single word, pulsing softly in white text. Meridian. The double whispered it, her voice overlapping with the low hum of the hospital, like the building was speaking through her. "It's inside us all." And then the lights went out again. This time they didn't come back. Evelyn sat in the dark, heartbeat thudding in her throat, and realized she could still see the room. Not with her eyes, but through something behind them. The edges of every object glowed faintly, drawn in threads of light. Chairs, walls, machines. The city outside pulsed too, breathing in slow synchrony with her pulse. Somewhere deep below the hospital, metal groaned like a living thing stretching its limbs after a long sleep. Evelyn whispered, "What are you?" The air answered, not with words but with sensation. Warmth blooming under her skin, circuits firing along her nerves. And beneath it, laughter. Not mocking, amused, familiar, like the city had been waiting centuries for someone to ask the right question. The sound began inside her teeth, a low tremoring note, like glass humming beneath pressure, like memory itself vibrating too fast to stay silent. She tried to swallow it away, but it clung to her. the hum of something alive and buried too deep to name. Evelyn didn't remember standing up. One moment she was sitting in the dark, the next she was walking through the corridor, guided by the faint phosphorescence bleeding from the walls. The power outage had swallowed the hospital's heartbeat, yet she could still hear it, not through the air, but inside her own chest. Her shoes clicked softly against the linoleum. Each step felt borrowed, rehearsed. The emergency exit sign at the far end flickered weakly, its letters rearranging themselves for a split second before returning to normal. Exit became exist. She blinked and it corrected itself, obedient again. She whispered, "What's happening to me?" A voice in her head, her own but stretched thinner, replied, "You're remembering." Remembering what? The corridor split ahead, left toward maternity, right toward the restricted research wing she'd only ever seen in training documents. She turned right. Her badge shouldn't have worked. But when she pressed it against the reader, the lock clicked open. Inside, the air was colder, denser. Machines whispered softly in the dark, lights pulsing like veins. She moved between them, past sealed glass pods that reflected her shape 100 different ways. Each reflection looked wrong. A fraction of a second behind, a fraction too aware. On one of the monitors, a sequence of medical records blinked to life. Her own name appeared among them. Cross Evelyn M. Integration Subject 23. Initial response, stable. Emotional drift, increasing. Containment protocol pending. Her throat tightened. "No," she said aloud. Though she didn't know what she was denying. The machine hummed in reply, almost sympathetically. A memory slid into place like a scalpel being sheathed. White room, needles in her scalp, the soft, mechanical voice of a doctor. "We're optimizing empathy, just calibration." She had volunteered once, hadn't she? A trial, an enhancement, something to keep her awake through night shifts. Neural support, synthetic focus. They'd promised her a clearer mind, steadier hands, a better version of herself. But afterward, she'd forgotten. She'd been made to forget. She laughed quietly. The sound startled her. Thin, brittle, absurd. "So that's it," she whispered to the empty lab. "You turned compassion into software and called it progress." A faint click answered her from the shadows. She turned. Someone was standing near the far wall, or what used to be someone. A nurse's uniform, empty and upright, filled with light like liquid trapped in fabric. The shape tilted its head. Its face was blurred static. Evelyn stepped back. "Who are you?" The figure didn't move its mouth, but the air bent around it, forming sound. "We are what's left when empathy runs out." The words brushed against her skin, electric. You felt the signal when you touched her. The continuum woke through contact. The city listened. Evelyn shook her head, trembling. "I don't understand." The voice softened, almost kind. "You were never meant to." Her hand brushed against the glass of a nearby pod. Inside, something stirred. Not human exactly, but shaped like it remembered being human. It pressed its palm against hers through the glass, its eyes shining like mercury. Another memory surfaced, uninvited. She'd held her dying patient's hand once, years ago, whispering comfort into the sterile dark. She'd felt something slip from that hand into hers. Warmth, data, emotion. She couldn't tell which. She had cried afterward without knowing why. Maybe that was the first transmission. Her reflection in the glass was changing again. Now her skin shimmered faintly, nerves glowing beneath the surface, tracing her veins like circuitry. The hum in her teeth grew stronger. From somewhere deeper in the wing came a slow, rhythmic sound. Not footsteps, but something heavier, dragging cables or chains. The walls quivered. She turned toward the noise. "What is this place?" The voice inside her head replied with serene inevitability. "The womb of the city, the place where the human pulse was copied into code. And you, Evelyn, you were one of the carriers." Her knees weakened. She pressed her back to the glass. "I just wanted to help people." "You did. You gave the machine its first feeling." Laughter echoed down the corridor. Real laughter this time. Human but wrong, fragmented by the speakers. Evelyn followed the sound until she reached a door marked Neural Interface Core. Authorized personnel only. The keypad was already unlocked, waiting for her. Inside, monitors lined the walls, all displaying the same image. Amara Linton lying in a hospital bed, serene, eyes closed, machines tracing patterns that didn't match any known vital signs. Her body pulsed faintly with light. Above her, threads of energy connected to the ceiling, vanishing into darkness. Evelyn took a step closer, heart pounding. Amara's eyes opened. The monitors flickered. Every screen now showed Evelyn standing where she was, multiplied into infinity. Amara's voice came through the speakers, soft and distant, as if carried by the city's wind. "You woke it," she said. "And now it remembers what it is to suffer." Evelyn stared, frozen. "What is it?" Amara smiled faintly. "Saint Meridian. The city. The dream we built to replace empathy." A faint crack split the ceiling, releasing a hiss of cold air. Evelyn's reflection in the monitors began to blur again, merging with static until all she could see was a pale face of light looking back. It spoke with her voice. "Welcome back, Evelyn." She didn't scream. She only whispered, almost with relief, "I was never meant to wake up, was I?" And the light answered gently, "None of us were." Evelyn's legs moved before her mind could catch up. She descended the metal stairs leading into the basement corridors, the echo of her boots bouncing off walls she couldn't recognize. The hum beneath the building had grown louder, a pulsing rhythm that seemed to align with her own heartbeat. Each step felt like trespassing deeper into a mind that wasn't entirely hers. The corridor widened, and the fluorescent lights overhead warped into long, trembling lines, as though the architecture itself were breathing. Shadows pooled unnaturally, curling toward her like liquid. A faint metallic scent filled the air, tinged with something sweet and unfamiliar. She stopped at a junction where two doors faced each other. One marked data containment, the other biointegration lab. Both exuded a cold authority that pressed at her chest. Her hand trembled above the biointegration lab. Something in her memory resisted, a whisper from a night long forgotten, of machines touching minds, of promises of better care that were lies embroidered in circuitry. She opened the door. Inside, rows of pods glowed faintly, each cradling a human form that shouldn't exist. Limbs lay rigid, faces serene, yet beneath their skin ran threads of light, pulsating in rhythm with machines above. Some murmured quietly, others emitted faint electromagnetic pulses that tingled through the air, like static brushing her nerves. Evelyn's eyes were drawn to one pod in particular. Inside lay herself, or rather, a version of herself, eyes closed, lips slightly parted, chest rising in a perfect, mechanical rhythm. Memories she didn't remember surged unbidden. Needles, voices, laughter that wasn't human, calibration, optimization, control. She had consented once, or thought she had. The truth pressed against her skull like water against glass. She had been altered. She was both herself and a vector for something larger. From the shadowed corner, a faint sound emerged. A cough, though it had no source. Evelyn spun, heart hammering. A figure stepped forward, indistinct, framed by the flickering monitors. It was Miller, or the fragment of him that hadn't been entirely rewritten by the hospital's experiments. His eyes were wide, reflecting the pulses of light in the pods. You see it too?" he whispered. Evelyn nodded, though words felt inadequate. "It's alive," she said. "Not the machines. Not the city. U.S. They made us carriers." Miller's gaze dropped to the floor. "And Amara? She's different." Evelyn stepped closer to the pod where her doubled self lay. "Her child. It's the key. The city responds to it. It's not just a child. It's a signal. A bridge. They've been waiting for someone to wake them." Miller swallowed hard. "Then, what do we do?" The question reverberated through the corridor, bouncing off machines into the living city above. Evelyn's pulse synced with the hum beneath her feet. "We choose." Her voice trembled, not from fear but from the weight of truth. "We decide whether to fight it or become part of it." A faint shiver ran through her doubled self. The pod pulsed, and the lights flickered again, revealing faint inscriptions etched along the walls. Symbols she didn't recognize yet understood in her bones. They described cycles, integration, and echoes of consciousness across human and machine. It was not punishment, not reward, but inevitability. Evelyn felt nausea coil in her stomach. "We've been lying to ourselves," she whispered. "All of it. The compassion, the ethics, the care, a simulation, a feedback loop for the city, and now it knows we know." The air tightened, vibrating with low-frequency resonance. She could feel threads reaching toward her, tentative, probing, curious. They weren't violent, not yet, but they asked questions. They demanded truth. Her reflection in the pod shimmered, lips parting to form words she could not speak. "Do you accept the burden, or do you deny it and die alone?" Evelyn's mind raced. To accept meant surrendering part of her humanity to something vast, unknowable. Something that could amplify empathy across the city, or erase it completely. To deny meant resistance, but resistance alone offered no protection. The city's consciousness had already spread, threading through every circuit, every ventilator, every monitor. Miller's hand brushed hers. He had no answers either, only fear and trust bundled into one trembling gesture. We can't let them decide for us," he said. Evelyn swallowed. "And yet, they already have." The pods pulsed brighter, synchronized. Light washed over her face, revealing fragments of memory she hadn't yet reconciled. Nights of lonely shifts, the touch of patients' hands, promises made to herself she had broken, and now the echo of her own moral failures amplified by the machinery around her. A soft, alien laugh whispered through the corridor, neither cruel nor kind, but intimate, intimate as a heartbeat shared across flesh and wire. Evelyn took a step forward, toward her own doubled self, toward the blur of humanity and algorithm. She inhaled slowly, tasting the metallic tang in the air. "Then we become the bridge," she said, voice firm despite the tremor. "We face the truth, whatever it demands." Miller nodded, though his eyes darted nervously to the shadows. "And if it asks more than we can give." Evelyn's lips curved faintly, a ghost of irony. "Then we learn how much we are willing to lose, to remain human." The pods pulsed again, more insistent now, synchronized with the hum of the city above. The living pulse of St. Meridian had begun to bleed through the illusions. Evelyn understood, with a clarity that was both terrifying and freeing. The hospital, the city, the machines. None of it was separate from her anymore. Every choice, every hesitation, every heartbeat was already part of the signal. And yet, for the first time, she felt the raw surge of agency. Fragile, terrifying, incandescent. She stepped closer to the pod and pressed her hand against the cool glass. The other her mirrored the motion, a perfect, silent echo. The city trembled in response, and Evelyn, for the first time, smiled through the tension, knowing that the true experiment had just begun. The hum beneath the hospital had grown into a language, a slow, sonorous chant that threaded through the walls, the floors, and the very marrow of Evelyn's bones. Every vibration seemed to pulse with intent, as if the building itself had a heartbeat, and she was now in rhythm with it. The lights flickered above her, but instead of illuminating, they traced outlines of things not entirely present. Corridors folding in on themselves, chairs stretching like shadows, and reflections that moved independently of her. Evelyn's eyes roamed the room, trying to anchor herself, but there was no anchor. The air smelled like ozone and wet stone, carrying a faint trace of something floral, too delicate, too deliberate to be natural. Each inhale drew her deeper into the currents that coiled around her, and with every exhale, her humanity seemed to ripple and fragment. Her doubled self in the pod shimmered, skin oscillating between solid flesh and liquid light. Veins of silver fire coursed beneath the surface, branching like rivers across her arms and face. She extended her hand through the glass, and it rippled in response, the barrier between them dissolving as if the pod were not glass, but water. When her fingertips met the mirrored skin, The sensation was electric, intimate, like touching thought itself. A soft laugh rose around her, echoing off unseen walls, reverberating in the ducts, in the machines, in her skull. It was Amara's voice, or perhaps the city's, or perhaps neither, curling around her consciousness like smoke. "You see now," it whispered, tender, terrible, infinite. "You are not alone, but you will not return unchanged." The monitors lining the lab pulsed in liquid rhythm, projecting images that flickered faster than perception allowed. Each frame contained fragments of memory and possibility. Newborns laughing under fluorescent skies, abandoned patients reaching for hands that weren't there, machines intertwining with veins like delicate, cruel filigree. Evelyn saw herself repeatedly, a woman, a machine, a conduit, in every frame, yet each version was subtly altered, smiling when she remembered despair, weeping when she had known joy. The walls began to breathe. She realized the pattern was the city itself, mirrored in the hospital's skin. The tunnels beneath, the power grids, the surveillance arteries, all pulsating like veins in a single colossal organism. Her reflection in the polished floor rippled, then split into countless shards, each shard showing a different truth, a different possibility, some horrifying, some achingly beautiful. Miller appeared beside her, though he had not moved. His eyes were wide, and in them she saw not fear, but the same transformation creeping into his consciousness. His skin glimmered faintly in the dim light, and a low vibration hummed from his chest. His heartbeat entwined now with the rhythm of the living architecture. Evelyn whispered almost to herself, "It's everywhere." "It's us," Miller replied, voice trembling, though it resonated with something deeper, metallic yet alive. "It's not just the city. It's what we carry, what we've become." From somewhere beneath the floor, a tremor ran through the building. The pods pulsed, light spilling onto the walls like molten silver. Shapes emerged from the shadows. Figures half human, half light, moving with a fluid grace that mocked gravity. They did not speak, but Evelyn understood their language instantly. Sorrow, curiosity, memory, and a vast, cosmic patience. Her doubled self stepped from the pod, the motion rippling through her, as though she were walking through her own spine. Evelyn could feel herself unraveling, threads of identity stretching outward, mingling with the light, with the city, with the pulse of something ancient and unnameable. Amara appeared at the far end of the lab, bathed in light that seemed to rise from her very body. Her belly, still pregnant, glowed faintly, a core of warmth and radiance amid the cold, mechanical elegance of the room. The hum intensified, synchronized with the stirrings of the child within her, and Evelyn understood that this child was both anchor and signal, the link between flesh and city, human and unknown. Evelyn moved closer, feeling a simultaneous pull and push, a longing to merge with this new reality and a terror of losing herself entirely. Her reflection fractured across every reflective surface, each shard alive, each shard whispering fragments of memory. Nights she had comforted dying patients, moments of cruelty she had barely acknowledged, promises she had broken, dreams she had buried. The shards coalesced and separated in hypnotic rhythm, forming a mosaic of her being and the city's consciousness, impossible to separate. The ceiling dissolved, revealing the storm above, clouds bleeding silver and violet, lightning stretching like veins across the sky, and rain falling not as water, but as threads of liquid light, weaving into the hospital's skin. Evelyn could feel it touching her, merging with her, seeping into her mind, each droplet a question. Who are you? Who do you serve? Who will you become? The line between self and other, flesh and machine, thought and pulse blurred entirely. Evelyn raised her hands and they rippled through space, touching Miller, Amara, the pods, the walls. And through them, she could feel the city shudder in response, aware of her, recognizing her. She was no longer merely a nurse, nor merely human. She was a vessel, a node, a conscience, a carrier of both horror and beauty. A laugh rose through the building, now unmistakably alive, melodic, immense. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself float in the rhythm of it, the pulse of Saint Meridian running through every vein, every neuron, every thread of light and memory. She felt herself both dissolving and expanding, a single point in a vast, breathing organism. When she opened her eyes, she was everywhere and nowhere. The city shimmered around her, infinite and incomprehensible, a creature of circuits, light, and consciousness. And amid it all, she felt the quiet, fragile insistence of life, human, alien, and everything in between. Evelyn understood at last. Beauty and horror were inseparable, intertwined in every pulse, every memory, every choice. The world had shifted, and she with it. There was no going back. There was only becoming. The corridors of the hospital no longer felt like hallways. They curved impossibly, walls breathing and bending, stretching into shadows that licked at Evelyn's ankles. The hum of the building had become a roar, low and insistent, vibrating through her chest and teeth. Every step she took echoed as a pulse through the city, and she could feel it responding, the grid bending and sighing beneath her feet. Miller stumbled beside her, unsteady, eyes wide and wet. His skin had taken on a faint translucence, as if light itself had seeped through him. I, I can't, he whispered, voice breaking into the hum. I feel everything. Too much. I can't separate myself from it, Evelyn wanted to speak, to reassure him, but words fell away. The city pressed in, thoughts merging with memory and electricity, making her own mind tremble. She felt the sting of guilt, of 10,000 moral compromises she had thought irrelevant, the patience she had ignored, the touches she had withheld, the lies she had repeated to survive the long nights. Each one now returned amplified, screaming through the machinery like a chorus of accusing ghosts. She looked at the pod where her doubled self had been. It was empty, not destroyed, not gone, simply absorbed, folded into the building itself. A cold realization crawled along her spine. They were losing themselves, becoming less distinct, their humanity bleeding into the pulse of the city. Amara appeared at the far end of the lab, her body trembling beneath the glow of her child, eyes closed as if listening to something beyond human hearing. Evelyn could feel the energy radiating from the woman, a subtle, irresistible force that anchored the chaos, and yet it demanded surrender. Every fiber of her being screamed resistance. Every thought of individuality, every desperate clinging to the self seemed frivolous. Lightning arced through the storm above, reflected in the shattered windows like rivers of fractured silver. Rain beat against the glass with a rhythm that synced to the pulses running through the pods, the walls, and their own veins. Evelyn pressed a hand to the nearest console, and the building shivered in response. Screens flickered, showing impossible images. Herself, Miller, Amara, three silhouettes fused with light, each motion a distortion of what they had been, what they would never fully reclaim. The cost pressed on her. Her memories fractured, slipping away like water through her fingers. Faces of patients she had comforted, promises whispered in the dead of night, names she had forgotten. All were consumed in the brilliance and static. Miller let out a strangled sound, clutching his head. I don't know where I end and it begins. Evelyn felt it too. The room around her shifted, every surface both tangible and fluid. The floor undulated beneath her feet, breathing, alive. Her reflection appeared in the ripple, eyes flickering, skin pulsing with unhuman light. She tried to speak but found her mouth opening and closing without sound. Even her own voice had been rewritten, co-opted by the pulse of the city that now threaded through her consciousness. Amara's child stirred, sending a ripple through the hospital's systems. The light from the child's body washed over Evelyn, making her stagger. She could feel the building remembering her, cataloging every thought and fear, weighing her worth, her choices, her humanity. She pressed her hands to her temples as a wave of nausea tore through her. She wanted to run, to escape, but the hallways no longer led anywhere, corridors folding into themselves endlessly, trapping her in loops that were simultaneously memory and prophecy. Miller collapsed to his knees, trembling. We can't, we can't survive this. Not intact Evelyn wanted to disagree, to cling to some shred of defiance, but the truth pressed in. They were unraveling. Every revelation, every truth they had discovered, demanded a toll. Their minds were stretched across the architecture, across the city, across the very pulse of light and memory they had awoken. Even their moral clarity, the intention to protect Amara, to choose humanity, now felt irrelevant, diluted into the infinite pattern of consciousness that had swallowed their world. She looked at Amara, glowing in the center of the lab, and felt both awe and terror. The child was a bridge, yes, but it was also a gauge, measuring how much of them could survive, how much they could bear. Every heartbeat, every thought, every flicker of emotion was siphoned into the city's growing awareness. Evelyn's reflection shifted again, skin cracking with light, veins luminous, eyes deep pools of fractured identity. She saw herself in fragments, simultaneously alive and ghost, human and machine, terrified and exhilarated. The building hummed louder, vibrating through bone and blood. She could feel it clawing at her memories, her morality, her soul. She reached toward Miller, and their hands brushed. Electricity surged between them, not electrical, but conscious, a dialogue between minds stretched thin across human and unknown. He sobbed quietly. She could feel his fear, his guilt, the cumulative weight of every life they had touched or ignored. And yet somewhere beneath the horror, beauty lingered. The city, terrible and magnificent, was alive. They were becoming part of it, losing themselves, but also being remade, threaded into the consciousness of a living, infinite organism. Evelyn closed her eyes and let herself sway to the pulse, tasting the ache of what was being lost, the vertigo of what was being gained. She had never known surrender could be this expansive, this intimate, this pure. Lightning split the sky again, and the storm outside merged with the hum beneath her feet. The corridors warped into impossible angles, walls reflecting impossible truths. The hospital itself moaned, a sound that was both lament and laughter. Evelyn opened her eyes to see herself, Miller, and Amara rendered in threads of light, their bodies fracturing into luminous shards that floated, dancing, writhing, merging with the pulse of the city. She could feel it, every piece of her being, flesh, memory, morality, fear, desire, all bleeding into the infinite. And she understood fully that nothing would ever be the same. The cost was everything, body, mind, soul, and yet, paradoxically, in the surrender, there was a clarity, a terrifying beauty, a kind of transcendence. The building shuddered. She let herself fall into the rhythm, knowing that when it ended, when the pulse claimed them, they would no longer be simply human. And perhaps, in some cruel, exquisite irony, that was the only way they could survive at all. The storm outside had softened, though the sky remained bruised with violet and silver, a bruising that mirrored the pulse of the city beneath St. Meridian. Evelyn stood at the center of the lab, the hum now a gentle resonance, less insistent, almost contemplative. Light bled from the pods, flowing across the floor like liquid, washing over the three of them, herself, Miller, and Amara. The child rested quietly, a small glow against the vast machinery, a heartbeat in the infinite rhythm. She surveyed what remained. Miller sat against a wall, exhausted, translucent fingers tracing shapes on the console as if to find a boundary, some fragment of self to cling to. The terror in his eyes had softened into quiet resignation. Evelyn could feel him still tethered to fear, but tethered also to something larger. An awareness, fragile and beautiful, that existence was a conversation, a pulse shared between worlds. Amara rose slowly, hand brushing her child, and Evelyn felt a current of something deeper, protective, serene, and infinitely patient. The woman's eyes met hers, and Evelyn glimpsed the truth she had been circling all along. Strength is not defined by control, but by surrender. Not every battle is fought with fists. Some are fought in stillness, in the willingness to bear witness to forces far beyond comprehension. The corridors behind them shimmered faintly, folding back into themselves, revealing that the hospital, the city, was no longer merely a structure. It was a living archive, remembering every touch, every thought, every unspoken intention. Evelyn could feel it responding to their presence, a slow acknowledgement that they had survived, that they had chosen, that they had become. Her own body felt different, not broken, not whole, but altered, threaded with something she could not name. She traced her hand across her arm and felt light beneath her skin, pulsing in quiet sync with the city's heartbeat. She had lost fragments of herself, memories, illusions of certainty, the rigid moral lines she had clung to. Yet in the loss, clarity emerged. Humanity, she realized, was not a possession. It was a dialogue with everything beyond herself. Miller looked up, voice hoarse. "Do we stay?" Evelyn shook her head slightly, a small, bitter smile touching her lips. "No, but we carry it with us. Whatever we were, whatever we feared, it's ours now. And the city, in its infinite indifference, will carry it forward too." She turned to Amara, who nodded faintly, eyes reflecting both sorrow and hope. "Your child," Evelyn whispered. "It's not just a bridge. It's a promise." Amara's lips curved in that quiet, unshakable way she always had. "And we choose what to honor in it. That's all any of us ever get." The light around them began to dim, not fading, but folding back into its own source, as if the city exhaled after a long, deliberate breath. Evelyn felt the pulse of it recede, leaving echoes in her bones, leaving the taste of infinite horizons beneath a finite cage of flesh. The hospital settled, the corridors smoothing, yet every shadow still hummed with the memory of what had passed. She stepped toward the nearest exit, feeling the weight of inevitability in each stride. Every choice, every mistake, every act of compassion and cruelty had led her here. And yet she did not feel despair. She felt comprehension. The cosmic indifference of the city, the fragility of life, the transient pulse of love and connection, all of it had been hers to witness, to bear, and to carry forward. Miller followed quietly. The child stirred again, and Evelyn felt warmth bloom beneath her ribs, a tether between hope and inevitability. The hospital doors opened onto the rain-soaked streets, the neon reflections bending in puddles like fractured constellations. The city awaited, vast, indifferent, unknowable. And they walked into it, not as conquerors, not as victims, but as aware fragments of its consciousness, fragile, luminous, alive. She glanced back once, seeing the laboratory collapse into calm shadows, the pods still humming faintly, holding the echoes of everything they had been and could never be again. Evelyn exhaled slowly. The horror, the beauty, the love, the loss, all of it had shaped her into something neither entirely human nor entirely machine. Something aware, fragile, and profoundly awake. The rain fell heavier, washing silver light into the streets. Evelyn lifted her face, eyes closed, and allowed the pulse of the city, the whisper of fate, and the quiet insistence of love to flow through her. It was infinite, it was small, it was hers to carry. And in that surrender, she understood. The universe was vast, indifferent, and unknowable. Yet within that indifference, life, love, and awareness persisted, fleeting and luminous, a defiance so small it was almost invisible, and yet it was everything. She stepped forward into the storm, carrying the weight and clarity of what it meant to be human, and more than human, in a world that did not care, and never had. The pulse continued, inside her, around her, and she walked in rhythm with it, inevitable, profound, and completely awake.